Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. You find me wearing funerary black to celebrate the death of Clan Giovanni and the end of our little talks. No more time for gargoyles, aramanes, Gaki, Quaijin, Lianan, Lamia, Libon. No time at all, too many things to do. But, little neonate, if you are so intrigued, perhaps you should do your own research, present your own tapes, as you call them, and illuminate other Cainites of similar age. The Giovanni, the Harbingers, Sargon, your last history lesson. Sargon was a mage, lived millennia ago, a truly brilliant man, a visionary, capable of unravelling the divine thread, the divine tapestry, and interpreting it, capable of looking up at the stars and understanding what they meant, realising God's plan by looking at a rock, a tree, berries in his hand, able to foretell the course of humanity, the course of invention, able to manipulate such things, able to see into the mind of God, find out the meaning of it all. Sargon carved these prophecies, these visions, into relics that became known as the Sargon fragments, scattered far and wide, for he was a paranoid man, albeit brilliant mind. And the most brilliant mind, most brilliant man, became the most foolish vampire. Sargon was embraced. And when he was embraced, he lost that divine spark that was so bright within him. He lost that chance to ascend that he was so close to reaching. He lost his vision. He lost his oracular ability. He lost his name. He was reborn as Cappadocius. Could not remember his name, could not even remember where he was from, and saw that he was in Cappadocia and so picked Cappadocius as a name. Could not remember where he had placed those fragments of prophecy, could not even remember writing them. Could vaguely recall being a seer of some small worth, certainly no better than Sort or Malkav. Could not recall hardly anything. Think of that. When you think of an antediluvian, and you think of a Noia melded with the earth, or Absimiliard huge and monstrous and writhing and evil, Cappadocius, the senile old man, travelling for millennia, attempting to unravel riddles that he had written. That is what he did. The occasions that he came across the Sargon fragments, and there were many of them, he tried to interpret them. He tried to interpret his own prophecies. Certainly his visions occasionally bore some fruit. He foretold the death of his own clan, incarcerating a number of the Cappadocians, a great number, hundreds, in the underground city of Kaimali. Using perhaps the last of his avatar's power, he wrote above the threshold of Kaimali that no son of Seth ever enter, let no child of Cain ever leave. No human, no mortal could ever enter that underground city. No vampire put in there unwillingly or entered willingly could ever leave. Perhaps he imprisoned the wrong vampires, for this empowered the nascent Giovanni, and we all know what happened to the Cappadocians after that. That is where our story could end, but it doesn't. The first few nights in the underground prison in which we were incarcerated were terrible. The first few centuries, even, were terrible. There were hundreds of us. Very few gifted with animalism, able to coax goats and rats and anything of the like to the threshold to feed from. And indeed, many of us were elders, some even Methuselah, incapable of drinking such weak blood. Some few fell to torpor, under the deluded belief that one night Cappadocius' ward may fall, either because he relented and realised his mistake, or perhaps because he would get what was coming to him, and someone might diablerise the stupid old bastard. They weren't correct. Wishful thinking. The ward stayed strong. No child of Cain could ever leave Kaimali. This left the last option. The only way to feed in a city of vampires and no mortals was to feed upon one another. This was not a quick process. The idea that in Kaimali we all fell to frenzy and there was one big brawl and there were 6 of us left standing is wholly incorrect. I've heard you refer to movies such as Battle Royale by the Nippon and The Hunger Games, I think you referred to it as, that dealt with similar themes. Hunger Games is a good title for what happened in Kaimali. There were hundreds of us, for years, allying with one another, forming factions, befriending one another, only to sink one's fangs into the back of one's friend's neck when one's friend's back was turned. The betrayals that went on. Trust became very, very hard to keep when you never knew where your next meal was coming from, so it may well be the Cainite to your right. He was thinking the same thing. It was terrible. Many of us fell to a form of depression, I suppose. Torpor was far too terrifying a prospect as well, for falling into torpor without protean to conceal our bodies in the earth would only result in our being diablerized in our sleep. A game of cat and mouse that lasted centuries played out, and perhaps would have done so until its inevitable conclusion, except another Cainite entered Kaimali. Willingly, stepping over that threshold knowing that he or she could never return to the world outside. Now, depending on who you ask, this Cainite could have been anyone. It could have been Lazarus, the child of Cappadocius. It could have been Japheth Cappadocius. It could have been Caius Coin, who was supposedly slain by Lazarus several hundred years before. It could have been Cappadocius' grandchild, Lady Constantia, or perhaps Unri, the keeper of Golgotha. Even my mind fractures at times, and it is difficult to recall who is who. Is Japheth Lazarus? Is Constantia Unri? Is Caius all of these? Perhaps it is an affliction of the Cappadocians that when true knowledge enters one's mind, one cannot keep hold of it for long. This Cainite, we shall call him the Capuchin, for he was dressed as a Capuchin monk, explained to us that the Cappadocians had fallen. The Giovanni had risen up and they had diablerized the clan almost en masse, and it was an event that was passing through the night. No other Cainites were doing anything about it. Cappadocius himself had fallen, and yet his soul had escaped Augustus Giovanni's grasp. And so while Augustus Giovanni became an antediluvian in power, perhaps not in spirit, this guest, the Capuchin, brought with him the Sargon fragments and a Sargon codex, the capability to interpret all of these visions that the mage Sargon once had, these dreams of apotheosis, which we worked out that Cappadocius had also been trying to work towards in his own inimitable way. Our reactions were mixed. Different factions split once again. One such faction felt that revenge should be meted out on the Giovanni, for they stole our vengeance. Another felt that the Giovanni should be thanked. We should make some kind of communication with them, because we were on their side. They brought down the antediluvian that had imprisoned us. There were more learned ones among us who were not just thinking with our fangs. One group came to the conclusion that Cappadocius had sought this all along. He sought apotheosis. He needed a way to free his soul and have it ascend. The only way for him to do this was through diablerie, and what better way of doing it than feeding oneself to a master of necromancy such as Augustus Giovanni. That Cappadocius had thrown his clan to the wolves over a course of centuries, bit by bit, just so that he could achieve this goal. He did not care one jot for his child or for his grandchild or any other Cappadocian for as long as he achieved his goal. And so his plans all resulted in the Cappadocians being wiped out by the Giovanni. And where did that leave us? And this is where my faction arose. We claimed that perhaps that was true. But Cappadocius imprisoned us for a reason. Cappadocius imprisoned us to keep us away from the Giovanni, and that we had centuries to study death, final death, the consumption of soul, necromancy, mortis, first-hand witnessing it every single night. We were capable of witnessing and partaking in that. No other clan, no other bloodline would get such exposure to the mysteries of death as we bringers of death. The Capuchin stayed impartial on all these prophecies, all this conjecture. I remember him being a wise being. I vaguely recall him being male. May not have been. It is difficult to recall sometimes. Clearly an elder vampire or being to befuddle my mind such, but the Capuchin gave us a route out. We could still not leave the confines of our prison. Cappadocius' ward still stood, despite his diablerie, and whilst we could take the route that the Capuchin offered, we would still not be able to enter the skinlands outside of Kaimali. And so we followed his route. We entered the shadowlands. He opened a gate across the gauntlet, and we entered the world of the dead, the spirits, the spectres, the shadowlands. And so, that is where we remained. The Capuchin taught us that we could actually subsist off of souls. So much diablerie had we partaken in that we were capable of devouring souls alone and leaving a body intact, and so we did. And we treasured the few times Giovanni crossed over the gauntlet and into the shadowlands, and we fed upon them, their soul and body alike. During this time we came to the conclusion as well, some of us, those of us in my faction, we came to this conclusion that not only had Cappadocius preserved us, he had clearly preserved us for a reason. He wanted us safe from the Giovanni. He wanted us safe from the Giovanni not only so that we could research necromancy, but so that we could help him on his path to apotheosis. It made perfect sense. He needed someone gifted with necromancy, someone so utterly soaked and saturated in mortis, in necromancy, in the study of death, that we would be able to help him reach God and allow him to diablerise God. For who better master of diablerie than the Harbingers of Skulls, the bringers of death, who had been forced to face nothing but diablerie for centuries? There were mixed reactions to this conclusion. Some of us were desperate to please the old man and get back in his good books as if we'd ever fallen out of them. The rest of us said, fuck that, in the vulgar argot of the time. You see, Cappadocius, while he may have been acting toward his betterment, and perhaps ours by imprisoning us and allowing us to study death wholly better than we ever could before, still imprisoned us, still made us eat our friends, still made us devour our brothers, our sisters, our childer, our sires, still made us live unlives of terror for centuries. Whether the grandest plan of all, whether it was truly the intellect of Sargon finally escaping Cappadocius' shattered mind or not, we were embittered. We still are embittered. We do not want to work towards Cappadocius' grand plan. We were quite happy to go on with our existence without involving ourselves in the Cappadocian plan, the Cappadocian scheme. We were still angry at the Giovanni, for they had stolen our vengeance. For if we had escaped of our own accord and the Giovanni had not done what they had done, we would have brought down Cappadocius and his loyalists. There were many maelstroms in the land of the dead and the shadowlands. The Tal Mahera, of which I have spoken to you before, believed that they had the guardianship of 4 antediluvian corpses physically brought across into the shadowlands where they would be safest. They did not know that a bloodline of necromancers, better schooled than any other, could come into contact with one of those antediluvian corpses during the maelstrom. Perhaps by fate, perhaps by luck, perhaps by chance, one of these antediluvians fell at our feet during the last great maelstrom, and we fell upon it, such rich vitae, better than we had swallowed in several centuries, just coursing down our throats, making us feel alive again. And perhaps it was this that allowed us shatter the ward of Cappadocius. Perhaps it was the maelstrom that allowed it. Whatever the case, as soon as we had drunk the blood of Aralu, I do not recall the antediluvian's name, we stepped through into the skinlands for the first time. A world that had changed beyond measure. We had witnessed it through the shadow, but it was nothing that we could have conceived of. We were terrified for so long. We found out about these sects. The Capuchin had been a repeated visitor, somehow able to come and go as he pleased, and he had told us about the Camarilla, the Sabbat. The Sabbat's aims of destroying the antediluvians, aims we were at least partially in sympathy with. We also saw the Sabbat as a grand tool. The sword of Cain could be wielded, or at least pointed, at the Giovanni for stealing our vengeance. The most important thing to us now that we are in the skinlands, we Harbingers of Skulls who have not imbibed blood for so long, and so had found our bodies wasted in the shadowlands, most of us skeletal, unless we have gifts of obfuscate, as some of us do. Some of us like to blend in, to speak to neonates such as yourself. What were we to do? We were in the skinlands, we were serving the Sabbat. That did not seem right. No, we were advisors, we were attached to the Sabbat. That's more like it. We would use the Sabbat for whatever we wanted. And what did we want? We wanted to bring down that senile old goat once and for all. We knew that his soul was still floating around in the shadowlands. We had never once managed to grasp it. We knew that he wanted us to just give him that final push, and we knew exactly how. We had the Sargon fragments. We spent years, centuries interpreting them, realising exactly what Cappadocius needed to do to reach God and maybe achieve his aim, maybe even stave off Gehenna and save the rest of the Cainites. Reform the world in the image of Cappadocius. How terrifying would that be? We decided we would stop him. We would let him get so close, then we would snuff out Cappadocius's dream, Sargon's dream. We would allow him to get within a hair's breadth and then destroy those Sargon fragments, just as we destroyed the Giovanni, his only other chance of reaching that divinity that he was so desperate to climb towards. The Harbingers of Skulls are not many, but they are powerful, for they are fueled by diablerie across centuries. They are fueled by the consumption of souls in the Shadowlands, spirit and spectre both. We are fueled by an anger toward the Giovanni for stealing our vengeance. We are fueled by a hatred toward almost all clans for allowing Cappadocius to do what he did to us. We have no designs of power. We do not want to be Archbishop of this city, or Cardinal of that, Prince of this city, or Primogen over there. We are angry. We are bitter. We have started already. The Giovanni bloodlines, the Pisanob, the Della Passaglia, those ones in outlying regions we have been able to take down all too quickly. We know that there are less of us than there are the Giovanni, and that is why we have the Sabbats to point at the Giovanni. We can see that unlike other clans, we are unified with one goal, and it is a tangible one. It is the destruction of all of those who have wronged us, all of us who have capitalised on our imprisonment. What we do after that, well, we have immortality to work that out, don't we? I thank you very much for listening to these lessons, and I hope that you don't tell anyone about them. I wouldn't like to be hunting you one night, although I do have a taste for neonate blood.